right, welcome to the JubbTalk portion of this video. That was one of many flowers. That piece is one of many pieces that I have created that are in tribute to and reference to the work of Brian Eno and Harold Budd. And Eno is very easy. You just take Eno and you flip it around backwards and you get the word one. You put the word one in the title and you've got a Brian Eno reference. And for Harold Budd, I started thinking about how buds become flowers, and so this piece became one of many flowers. There's not a lot going on technically in this song that's not better explained in other videos, so I wanted to take this chance to talk about what I call the Banter Cycle. The Banter Cycle began around 1996 when I bought a 4-track tape recorder, and I started experimenting with overdubbing. And at that time, I decided that anything that I did by myself like that, with overdubs or later with loops, that would be called banter. And so initially it was just banter, and then over the years I began sort of playing with that as the basis for a band name. So the first one in 2001 was Banter Solo Trio. That version of Banter Solo Trio was this really kind of crazy free jazz, free improvisation thing involving lots of squonking saxophone and a little bit of keyboard, and was done with the 4-track recorder. And that only lasted for a few months. Then I kind of stopped playing for a while, and then around 2006 I started playing again, and I very quickly started using computers as part of what I was doing at that time. And so I wanted a kind of more updated version of that, and I came up with Banter /3.1. I thought the slash and the point kind of gave it a URL type of a feel, and the 3 and the 1 make reference to the solo trio of the first iteration. I did that for a while, and then I wanted to do something different, and I came up with what I think is probably my most fun band name I've ever used, which is something like Banter and the Cybernetic Inevitable All-Stars. Now, as for the first part, when I was thinking about how I wanted to change the name, I knew that I wanted something like Banter, and then I thought, ha! My friend Harrison wrote a song called Something Like Falling for his band Troop of Echoes, and so if I call myself Something Like Banter, then I can reference Something Like Falling. And the second part, the Cybernetic Inevitable All-Stars, the phrase itself actually comes from Lester Bang's article about Kraftwerk. And around the time that I was working on this, I saw a video interview with Bebe Barron, and she was talking about how she and her husband Louis went about making the soundtrack for Forbidden Planet. And she talks about how they were being influenced by cybernetics. Now, I don't really know much of what that actually means, but I know what she talked about, which was that they were creating these circuits and then letting them run, and that they sort of had a life of their own, and they would then record it and take the best bits. But that part about like having a life of its own, that struck me as very similar to what I was working on at the time, which was that in Reason, which simulates a synth rack, you can flip it around to the backside and have access to the chords, and that includes control voltage as well. And so you can start to plug things in to one another in such a way that they just sort of start making sound on their own, and then they follow kind of rules and patterns based on what you've told them. And that struck me as very similar to what Bebe Barron was talking about in that interview. And so, considering she was saying that these ideas were coming from cybernetics, and I had just heard this phrase, I just took that and came up with Something Like Banter and the Cybernetic Inevitable All-Stars. Then a few years ago, when I started doing this project with the MIDI looping with the Theremin, I decided initially to go back to the Banter Solo Trio name, partially because I just liked the name. I liked the way it sounded. And initially, all of those pieces were in the trio format, so they'd have 2 looping layers and then a solo layer on top. After I was working with that for a while, I started creating more and more pieces that were either just duos or quartets or some solo pieces as well. And so sticking with just Banter Solo Trio didn't seem to make any sense anymore, and I needed something that was a little more catch-all, and that's when I came up with the Banter Experience, which kind of allows me to cover sort of all of those different things. And this has been a project of the Banter Experience, and as I said in the very first video, this phase of the project is coming to an end with this series, and I'm moving on to a whole new thing, which by the time you see this video, I will be deeply working on, and I'm not sure what that will be called yet. It might be the Banter Experience, it might be something else entirely. I'll have to find out when I gotta get in there and see what the project is all about. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next time when I talk about phased looping.